Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. My name is Vanshika and you're watching Chat and Chew, the mental health series for which this is the final episode. I know it's been a while, I know it took a very long time, but I'm gonna explain everything right now. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking a bit too fast. It's because the whole video is already pretty long compared to all the other episodes and I don't want to make it any longer. Thus, I want to try and speed up my language as much as possible and as much as you can understand. First and foremost, I want to apologize to Himangi especially, and I'm reading off my laptop because I have some notes so that it goes quick. I do not want to seem disrespectful or ungrateful towards Himangi. Just know that Himangi, my greatest apologies lie with you, but here it is now. I haven't forgotten. As some of you may or may not know, May was also my exam period, and while other episodes were pre-recorded already, this one not so much. Adding to that, the footage was almost 3 hours long, which made it hard to edit anything out of. And I would like to add, please ignore the image and sound quality. I tried to make it as best as possible, but the whole video was recorded over Zoom. As much as I tried to record my side of the video through a separate camera, in this case the camera footage got corrupted and I couldn't really do anything about it. Another reason why it took me a while to edit is because I wasn't sure what to keep and what not to keep. In this episode we definitely discuss everything we've touched upon throughout the series, even though it was mainly supposed to go towards depression and anxiety. A lot of the content seemed very relevant, and thus I decided to change the theme of the last episode, and it made more sense as a whole to sum up everything that we've discussed. There are definitely some more sensitive topics other than depression and anxiety, such as self-harm, panic attacks, that have been discussed in this video and for which I'm giving a disclaimer right now. But I feel another thing that I should be giving a disclaimer to is for the fact that some views and ideas have been challenged throughout the video, solely for the reason to guide this discussion and challenge all points of views and to get a good and healthy variety of content. However, if you're someone with strong beliefs upon these sensitive topics and you feel as though you may not handle your views being challenged, please click off this video. And I say that with full respect. There's nothing wrong with your views. Your views are valid, of course. I'm just saying this because for the sake of broad content basis, I have nudged the conversations into different directions, and I wouldn't want you to leave this video frustrated or emotional and ruin your day because of something that I said that I may or may not have even meant. Last but not least, I ran into several people over the past however long I've been gone that motivated me to post and get back again, and it was very unexpected. However, I was very pleased, and if you're watching that, you know who you are, and I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you're enjoying this. I hope you're gonna enjoy this video even more, and stay tuned for everything else. I see you. I'm grateful for you. Without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Hi, how are you doing? How's your day?
I'm good. How are you?
Good as well. Thanks for asking. Well, we have Himangi here, who is a part of my family, I think. It was very hard for me to understand our relationship because I would always think that she's my sister, but it turns out that she's my mom's cousin.
Yeah.
I was like, I have to get her on, which is something I say with everyone that I had on, because everyone that I have had on has like this different touch to them. And I'm like, I need these people on, I need them to talk. And one of the reasons I got Himangi was because we had that conversation where I was almost sure that you studied psychology or something connected to psychology. Yeah. And then you started a page recently just like related to mental health. And that is when I was like, yes, I need her on my page, on my channel too, because this is perfect. Mental health series plus a person who has a mental health Instagram page, it's perfect. So I think it was just fate.
Yes.
Well, to start off, why don't you tell us a bit about you? I just said that you have some like professional experience in psychology. You know more than an average person does, I'm sure, more than me. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, how you got into psychology, all of that.
Okay, so to start from my schooling, I did my schooling in India. And up until like 11th standard, I took psychology as one of my subjects. And for my bachelor's, I went on to doing bachelor's majoring in psychology in Singapore. And now I'm doing my master's in clinical child psychology in the UK. So since 11th standard, I have always wanted to do like psychology. So I had this connection with psychology, and I think that was the only thing that I knew. Like, that was the only thing that I knew. And everything else was just like, I forced myself to study it, and I forced myself to do it. But this was something that I really wanted to do hard. So as Vanshika told everyone, that I recently started a mental health page. The first Instagram page that I started was related to travel. it was because I wasn't confident enough to start my own mental health page, but it was always at the back of my mind. So when I started my mental health, which is recently, I also posted about something about imposter syndrome, and I think I resonate with it because I always feel like I keep telling myself that there are so many more knowledgeable people than me, and why would people follow me? And I doubted myself a lot because of that. But then after a lot of thought, I finally started my page because I'm a mental health advocate, and I believe that everyone should be psychoeducated in order to remove the stigma around mental health. And the 1 year that I lived in India and the few years that I lived in Singapore, I saw a lot of educated people that didn't value mental health very much. And especially the generation that comes before us. And that is why I keep talking about unlearning, because especially that generation and even us, we need to unlearn a lot of things when it comes to mental health, especially. So I think, yeah, the main reason was to psychoeducate people to remove the stigma around mental health.
That is crazy. First thing, it is crazy that you have been like into what, 3 places? India, Singapore, and UK. Just like
And Dubai, and I was born in Hong Kong. Yeah. I've been traveling quite a bit.
quite a bit. I mean, people find it crazy how I ended up in Poland from India because I mean, it is just one place, but like I guess the distance is what they find crazy. Like, how do you end up from India to Poland? It's like polar opposites. But the fact that you were in so many places, but almost all of them were connected to psychology. Like somehow psychology drove you there. Like to UK, for example, you came specifically to study, right? I find that crazy because I'm hoping to go to uni this year, and just the idea of me leaving Poland is a bit scary. So the fact that you travel for your passion that far, it blows my mind. I really admire the fact that you were able to do so much around it, and it only emphasizes the reason why I have you here in the first place. You touched upon imposter syndrome a little, and I know that wasn't part of the questions that I sent you, but would you mind explaining a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so in layman terms, I think imposter syndrome is something like, for example, I have been studying psychology since so many years, but then I still don't feel like I deserve to say get an internship somewhere in the UK, or I feel like other people deserve it more, and I don't know why I get to come to UK and I get to study what I'm studying when other people deserve it more and other people don't get the chance to do it. So I feel like an imposter. There are ways to cure it as well, like I posted about this, where we can rephrase how we think and what we tell ourselves. So instead of saying I'm worthy, I can just say that I deserve to be here, I deserve to be heard, and all my feelings and my thoughts and whatever I say, they're valid. They might not be there, but they're valid.
100% agree with that. And it's crazy because up until you posted it, I didn't know that that's like a syndrome. I didn't know that I didn't know what an imposter syndrome was. Like, I've always heard of it. I never knew what it was because I think it's just not talked about enough. I didn't know that I was going through it either. And it's crazy how many of us feel that way. This question, since you have studied psychology, since you've had experience with it for longer than any average person, I think, how would you describe the difference between depression and anxiety? Because I think a lot of people just misunderstand and mix it. I myself suffered through both, yet I thought it's the same thing. So
I'll make it simpler. So what I've learned through years, there is no simple definition of depression and anxiety. And people might think to understand depression is like a person is sad, they're isolating themselves from people and having suicidal thoughts. But that's not it. There are many more things that a person with depression goes through. And same with anxiety. So it is very subjective. It really depends on people. Some of them might be very happy on the outside and they mask themselves and When they go back home, they're sad, but you'll never know that they're going through something. And again, the same goes with anxiety. It's not just the feeling of being anxious or nervous. It is all, they all have like physical symptoms as well, and which many people now they're getting to know. Again, like there is a DSM definition, but I really don't want to focus on that, because people need to know that it's more than that. So people with depression and people with anxiety, and in my personal experience, I've met people suffering with depression who have anxiety as well, and that's the worst combination. So it's like a cycle.
Yeah.
A person is in. Being depressed or having depression is like you keep telling yourself that I'm useless, or I'm not doing anything good. I'm people, why do people like me, or I'm the worst. And then anxiety is like you want to do something, but then if you don't do it because of depression, you'll have anxiety, and you'll have palpitations, you'll have racing heartbeats, and you'll have feeling dizzy, and you'll. So it's not, I don't know how to define it, but it's just that when people go through it, they also cannot describe how they're feeling.
As somebody that has gone through both, I could not tell the difference between anxiety and depression. And I know that medically there is a difference, but I would do Google searches and I'd be like, shit, the difference between them, it's like the line is so thin that you don't even know where the line exists.
Yeah.
But this might sound a bit stupid, but I think one of the simplest things that helped me understand the difference, and that was actually on an Instagram post, was people with anxiety are worried about the future, or like they live in the future, and people with depression are worried about the past, or they live in the past.
Yes.
And I sat with that thought for a while, and I was like, okay, that makes sense, because in both ways it is fear. It's like eventually, at least from my experience, my experience of depression and anxiety was mainly fear. My fear is one of my biggest weaknesses, and I guess both of them are fear, but like the anxious fear is different, the depressive fear is different. And I think that little statement was the easiest way for me to categorize the two apart. And I think as somebody that goes through both, especially, has to categorize them separately so that you can focus on them separately as well.
That's why it's very important to psycho-educate people, because even physical symptoms, if you feel like, oh, you because anxiety attacks usually they feel like a heart attack. Okay. So, exactly. So if it's a heart attack, say it feels like you will feel like going to the hospital to get yourself checked. But then there's depression, where you feel like you want to sleep all day, and people will think you're lazy, people will think you're not doing anything in life. But then that's like feeding into more self-harm in a way.
No, I know for sure what you mean, because I used to have panic all the time. I never knew that they were panic attacks. I never knew that that's like an issue. So it's crazy. But leading on to the second question, you know how even us talking right now, we're so focused on depression and anxiety, and I think everyone now, especially in the social media generation, they're so highly focused on depression and anxiety and what it is, how you can cure it and everything, but there's very little talk about how to avoid it in the first place. Of course, not in every situation it could be avoided, but I think there are many ways where you can just simply, by being aware of it or anything, you can just avoid getting into depression or anxiety in the first place. And what are your opinions on that? Do you believe that can happen? If yes, like how do you see it?
Okay, so I actually, when you sent me the question, I actually had to think a lot about it. So my conclusion is, I think there are ways to avoid it, but just to be clear, that people who are clinically depressed and have anxiety right now, I see you and your feelings are valid. And what I'm going to say, that it doesn't mean that you guys are not doing your best. It's that everybody needs help, and you should go to therapy first of all. So people who want to avoid it and who think are going through, like going towards that direction, I think the first and foremost thing is to acknowledge and actively look at signs that shows you that you're going in that direction. And again, to get back to the recent live that I did with a very dear friend of mine who is a mental health advocate herself, I got the perspective of a person who has clinical depression and anxiety. So we talked about how mental health self-care is very important, so that we don't get overwhelmed by our negative thoughts, which actually pushes us or triggers us to depression and anxiety. So constantly checking yourself, constantly, positively, like nowadays people come up with positive affirmations for yourself. That's very important. In short, acknowledging our thoughts and self-care is important. Other than that, positive affirmations, as I said, and constantly reminding ourselves that whatever we think, especially negative thoughts, are just thoughts, and we should ground ourselves to the reality that is actually happening. So everyone takes time, and there's no need to rush the process. Just go through with it. And if people think they're getting overwhelmed with their emotions, the most important is go to a therapist.
100%. You said most of the things that I was aware of. The way I came up with this question was because of TikTok, actually, and TikTok is what right now my life teacher. But when I saw TikTok, because I follow a lot of therapists there, it blew my mind. I don't remember exactly what he said, but watching that video, I was like, shit, how come it's not a normal thing to think about? Like, even you just said, when I sent you those questions, they're mostly simple. You have to think about this one because it's something that I guess it just doesn't hit people naturally. And I thought about it the way you said it. You covered the first part, and I completely agree and love that. But the way I also thought about it, and this will be a bit harsh for some people to hear again, is in our generation, and I speak for my generation right now, I think we have a lot of people who just, I'm trying to put it very light because I don't want to offend anyone. I think people place themselves in a place of depression by themselves for like the wrong reasons, for like, you know what I mean? Like, some people just want attention so bad, and that also roots from different issues. Like, I don't know, most probably their childhood. I'm pretty sure it's their childhood, but just for the sake of having that much attention, a person will start, I don't know, for example, faking depression and then actually fall into depression while doing it. And it's hard I think it's even hard to find a cure for it when it goes through that direction, because you just don't understand. I think it's even hard for a therapist to understand what even caused it. I think also another reason why these people, like, childhood is one reason they might do it, but another reason I think why this happens is social media. Have you also noticed that I think around a year or two ago there was like this 3-year phase where depression, or like all these like I am depressed sort of Instagram pages were so trendy that every single teenager was following like 70, 100 pages that were just solely focused on I'm depressed or how they feel during depression. And then all over social media, not only Instagram, like social media. And I'm guilty of following all of these pages. There's like 3 a.m. quotes where a person just describes their depression and puts it out, and people are relating to it. And I think, if anything, it's literally, you know how reading positive affirmation helps you and like grounds you, and it sits in your head in a positive, like I'm healthy. If you keep repeating it, it sits in your head and it helps you positively. I think these pages did the same thing but negatively, where a person would see I am depressed, something as simple as I am depressed, it would sit in their head and it would cause depression. I think one of the things that I would add on to your answer would simply to avoid any social media pages, any books that actually, you know, I'm not even sure what to say, because I'm not saying that they're bad, they're wrong or anything. It's just be self-aware enough to know that it's an unhealthy habit. Just leave it, just let it go. It's like you smoke cigarettes, you know cigarettes are unhealthy, you leave cigarettes, right? Similarly, you want to avoid depression, you avoid negative outlets like this. It's what I would say, just avoid negative outlets, be that through social media, be that through books, be that through people. I think that's another thing that I would 100% add is just to avoid negative outlets.
That's fine.
We actually talked about this, I think, in one of the episodes when it came to therapy, and you just touched upon therapy, that people should go to therapy. So I'm going to assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you are a person that's in favor of therapy. Like, do you believe that even a normal person should have therapy? Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I thought. I definitely agree with it, but then I also feel, a part of me also feels that therapy is not always the right solution. That being said, I mean it from my personal experiences, but through that, what I mean is therapy as an idea, I think is perfect. I just think that people who practice it in reality is where that wrong turn occurs. Because, for example, me, I went to therapy, and first and foremost, it took me 6 sessions with different doctors to find my ideal therapist, and even then it wasn't the ideal therapist. Why? Because I started feeling that when I was going to her, I would come back even more depressed. And yes, I'm sure that that's part of the process as well, and that's kind of how I got in. That's kind of how I was diagnosed with clinical depression, only because my therapy sessions used to be so intense that my therapist decided to show me to a psychiatrist who would prescribe me with meds so that we can continue our session in without pain, without very high pain that I would go through with every therapy session. Just like when you have surgery or in labor, you have an epidural, you can do it without an epidural, but you have an epidural to help you go through the process. It's the same way I had medicine to help me go through the process, and that's the idea that she was applying. But even then, I had a feeling that every time that I would go into her office, I would come back even more depressed. And sometimes it was to a point where I would go to her office, because we have weekly schedules, right? I'd go to her office and everything is good. Everything finally in my life seems good, but I feel like since I'm here, I have to make use of this hour, and I would start creating problems where there were no problems, just because I had to go to therapy. And where I see an issue is the fact that I feel like what my therapist could have done was simply ask me one question: be, how was your day? Have things improved? If yes, what are the things improved? Focus on positive as much as you focus on the negative.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my view on therapy comes from. I just wanted to see, now that I've kind of told you all of this, how do you feel about it? Because I'm not going to say that therapy is wrong. I'm just people who are practicing it might be practicing it wrong, and that roots to different things, that's what they're taught or whatever. But hearing this whole what do you say now? What do you think about it now?
Okay, so I was 100. I still am 100% pro therapy, but definitely your experience is something which I haven't heard before, because people usually don't talk about therapy first of all. So for you to even talk about it and be open about it is a huge thing, and it should encourage people to make their own decision whether they want to go to therapy or not, but it's an option for them. Okay, the main thing about therapy is that yes, it is about getting to know the past of a person. Why therapists do that is because the person that you are today or we are today is because of our experiences from the past. So to change our personality or to change our behavior towards something that usually triggers you, for example, has to be changed, which won't happen if therapists focus on your present, because people follow patterns, patterns of behavior that they've learned through years of and that's why I talk about unlearning. That is one of the things that is the most difficult. But your experiences, your past has made you the person who you are, and it is very important to first that the person should acknowledge what has hurt them in the past. So that might be very triggering, and that is why you have a therapist, so that you can talk about those triggers. And therapists just want to know what triggers you. Many people can handle their emotions with no difficulty or problems, but they can acknowledge how they feel, but some people, they need help to do that. This is where the therapists come, and they give you the opportunity to explore your own thoughts and feelings and your patterns of behavior, as I said, from the past. They try to see what the trauma is, and they try to make you understand. See, therapists are not there to spoon feed you. No, they want you to understand your problem. They want you to understand that what your triggers are, so that next time, if you don't have a therapist, you know that this particular thing is triggering you. They want to be there. They help you with the techniques and tools that you can use that can help a person cope with their trauma or with their triggers, with their daily stressors. They'll make you realize that you have certain triggers and certain stressors in life, which will help you. When you don't have a therapist, then you can do the work.
Yeah.
In the end, you have to do your work. You can also tell the therapist what you expect from this session, and you can also tell them why you're here, what you want to change about yourself.
I'm so glad you did this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.